Hello and welcome. I'm Patrick Curtis, your host and chief monkey, and this is the Wall Street Oasis podcast. Join me as I talk to some of the community's most successful and inspirational members to gain valuable insight into different career paths and life in general. Let's get to it. In this episode, we follow Alex on his winding road through various VC and IB internships in college, including one at Goldman Sachs, to his latest jump to the FinTech space at Lex Markets. Learn what went wrong at the Goldman internship and the first startup, and advice to some of the younger listeners trying to navigate similar waters. Enjoy. Okay, Alex, thanks so much for joining the Wall Street Oasis podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It'd be great if you could just give the listeners a short summary bio.
Yeah, so I work for a real estate investment banking fintech. Previously was at a fintech debt fund kind of thing, lending operation and licensing out software. And before that, had a string of investment banking internships and the like, both in New York and London. A little bit of political experience earlier on, but I've mostly been on the finance track. And way back when I was at Middlebury.
Awesome. Thanks for that. So let's talk about your time back at Middlebury. I went to Williams, so familiar with the liberal arts channel. I would love to hear just, when you went to school, were you thinking finance? And I worked with your father, just for the readers to know. Alex's father was at Tailwind, where I worked way back when. But yeah, I'd love to hear just, was he an influence of you saying like, oh, you should go to finance, or was there family members that were in finance?
Yeah, I mean, he was definitely an influence. It was never coached, but it was one of those things of, and you probably know from Tailwind, of it always came home, right? It's a nonstop job. And so I was around it growing up and, had a lot of exposure growing up, both through my dad. And then later on in high school, I'd say, a good portion of people's parents either worked, in corporate law or in finance of some sort. And so there's a lot of exposure all around. I actually started interning back in high school. So my high school actually had an internship placement program, and I interned at RBS and Barclays before I was 18, which was, great experience just to have a foot in the door.
Your high school did that?
Yeah.
How was that? I've never heard of that. So that young. Was it like more a rotation, or was it a real internship?
Somewhere in the middle. I mean, look, these were, banks agreeing to take out a high school student for 3 or 4 weeks or whatever. So, the expectations are obviously pretty low, and it's, you're not actually working on real stuff, but you get to be in the office and meet people and be a part of it. And, you sort of get an early flavor, that the school sort of organized for us. And there was still, you applied, the school had a resume workshop. So I started pretty early on the track.
Was that just special to your high school, or do you know if there's other high school programs that do that?
I haven't heard of another high school that does that. I think that may have been unique to my high school. And it was a great opportunity. I grew up in London, and that was, we just, hop on the tube and go over to Canary Wharf and intern over the summer.
Oh, it was in London. Okay. Yeah. So, very cool. So yeah, tell me a little bit about that. Let's, before we even dive in, what do you mean you grew up in London, and what's the background there?
Yeah. So as you said, you worked with my dad at Tailwind, and my dad left Tailwind to go and take a job over in the UK, and moved the family over with him. So I went to the American school in London, and, call London home. My dad is actually still there, and, got an American high school experience with a bunch of, I would say 50% plus ish Americans, and everyone else Americanized. Had a sort of interesting experience being sort of a third culture kid, I guess they call it. Very different than where I was in the New York area before that. But, very glad I did it. It got me sort of a lot of international exposure early on. I also played rugby and got to travel all over Europe. So I really got to travel in my teens, and was pretty formative on my life going forwards.
That's lucky. Yeah, that's amazing. So
yeah.
You're kind of getting out of high school, you're applying to colleges, you end up at Middlebury. Are you thinking at this point, hey, you've worked at some banks, where you're thinking, hey, investment banking all the way, when you were?
I was dead set from day one, and it was a joke amongst my friends from day one. So I through my Barclays internship, had some, personal connections. I thought I was going to go back, and there was some turnover at Barclays in 2014. Mm-hmm. And the guys that I knew there didn't go back. And so my sort of freshman year idea sort of evaporated in midair. In like
freshman
April.
Summer? You mean for freshman?
my freshman summer, I was hoping to go back and have that be organized and have, really a really sort of solid thing to go down that road as a freshman.
Yeah.
Totally evaporated in late April of my freshman spring. And totally by chance, someone I knew met someone walking their dogs in the park in Rock Creek Park in DC, whose daughter was on the early days of the Clinton campaign. And and someone had dropped out, they needed someone. And so I sort of just fell into a Clinton campaign internship for my freshman year summer was my brief diversion from banking.
That's actually a really interesting topic, simply for the fact of like resume building and politics. And, the thought of, do you put that on your resume or do you
well, that's exactly it. It was on the resume through up until the 2016 election, and then it fell off the resume. It is still on my LinkedIn, way down there at the bottom. So if someone really wants to know, they can go look at it.
Got it.
But yeah, it's a sensitive topic depending on who I'm with.
Would you recommend putting that for people who do work in politics or campaigns? Do you feel like it's
I think it's helpful. I think it depends what you're doing and who you're working for, right? I mean, I don't want to get too political on this podcast. There are certain politicians that are particularly inflammatory that I would maybe be worried about. Yeah. To be honest, I was on the fence about Hillary Clinton. I think that was a very sort of sore topic for a while. But it was a really great experience to have at 18, 19 years old. Yeah. And I really stepped up in that internship. They gave me a lot of responsibility. And so I was able to speak to that.
Yeah.
Right. I was the organizer for the East Coast for them, volunteering out of the DC office in the end. So that was a really sort of cool thing to talk about for a while.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So you're doing that. You come into sophomore year. Now you're thinking, okay, for sure, I'm going to have this investment banking internship sophomore summer.
So sophomore year, I came in. And so the part where my friends made fun of me before we skipped over to sophomore was the banks started networking at Middlebury. We had on-campus recruiting early on, and it's not class exclusive, but it tended to be juniors. Now it's probably sophomores, because how all the process works. And I went as a freshman, and I think it took me probably 2 or 3 years to live down going to those events as a freshman. So on the focus of that was something in there as well. But yeah, to sophomore year, I came in still dedicated towards it. I'd done a bunch of networking, starting in those sort of freshman coffee chats, on-campus recruiting and whatnot.
Tell me about that. What do you mean? What do you mean the networking freshman coffee chats? So it's like, I know you went to the info sessions, but were you doing other stuff like Middlebury alums that were in banking? Like, were you already laying the ground?
I did get to that in the end, not as a freshman. As a freshman, it was much more talking to people on campus and talking to people they might know, and using my dad's connections and friends from high school's connections and sort of anyone that I knew. I think it was really, there was a lot of hustle that went into getting my sophomore internship, probably more than any other internship, to be honest, because there's not really, if you're not a diversity candidate, there's no structured process for sophomores. And it was the sort of really
no accelerated, at least back then there was no accelerated.
Yeah, exactly. It was not even accelerated. They wouldn't even take your application, right? I mean, you couldn't get into anywhere big unless someone reached out and pulled you in. And so there was a lot of pounding the pavement, cold emails, going to the Middlebury network, again, high school friends and dad's friends and anyone I met on campus and anything I could think of to just talk to someone. And I think I did. I think I found my spot in like late January, early February of sophomore year.
Yep. And what was that? And how did you find it?
It was a friend of my dad's who had a son who he'd introduced me to a while back, and I reconnected with the son, who is, I think he's about 10 years older than me, so somewhere in the middle there. And they were his venture fund was this tiny little thing at the time. It was 2 partners, maybe 3 partners, and 2 associates, and they wanted to go bring on a handful of interns for the summer. And I had a whole process to navigate because there's a whole bunch of laws about like college credit. If you're not going to pay your interns, you have to give college credit. And Middlebury refuses to take college credit, or at least did. And so it was this awkward thing of, well, they're not going to pay me and they can't give me college credit. And how are they going to take me? We ended up figuring it out. But went over, and it was funny. It was a British internship. I went back to the UK, all American intern class. And again, I still look back at it, incredibly fun. That was one of the really formative experiences of my career because I loved that summer. And it's crazy because at the time, like I said,
why did they hire all American interns? It was just, that was the class that they wanted to bring over or something?
I never got that far into that. I think it was a combination of they didn't have to pay them, and they were,
okay.
people at network. They had the college credit thing. It worked out. But the crazy part now is, well, it was a small fund then. They're now the largest retail venture capital fund in Europe, I believe.
Wow.
And I was working with really great guys, and I got to learn a ton.
Yeah.
And even as an intern, they had me on the investment team, and I'm learning how to screen pitches and learning how startups work. And then they started to realize, well, actually, maybe Alex can be operational too. And they started putting me in because they run a Y Combinator style fund over there where they literally share an office space with these firms they invest in. So you have the venture fund upstairs and all the startups downstairs. So you walk downstairs and go and consult with some of these guys. And I was doing a sort of split day a week thing. So I got really cool experience being on the ground floor of startups and being on the investment side as well, and learning both sides of the business. And again, with really, really great people who I'm still in contact with, and really were formative for me.
That's amazing. So besides like having good connections and being connected with that son, for people who don't have that, what do you suggest like they do to develop those relationships?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard. And, like I said, like you sort of said, I got very lucky that I was able to come in with some of those connections. The people that I knew that sort of did well without that, we all sort of followed the same process, right? I sort of struck gold because I had an extra bump, but I think everyone sort of did the same thing I did of you just talk to as many people as possible. And I think if you're very open with what you want and you talk to as many people honestly and you're interesting, eventually someone connects you. And so I know it was actually quite funny. My first week of freshman year, like literally orientation, there were three. My class at Middlebury, I was Feb, so there's a class of 100 people. We have our own orientation. 3 of us in this orientation all said to each other the first like 3 or 4 days of school that we're all going to work at Goldman Sachs, and all 3 of us went to Goldman, and all 3 of us left. But the other 2 guys who were in that as well, they did the same thing, right? I don't think they came in with the same sort of connections, but they really grounded out and they got involved on campus. They met other people, they got introductions, a lot of cold emails.
Yeah, give me a sense of that, like the scale of it, so people can kind of wrap their head around it. Like when you were coming into sophomore year, like how many phone calls or how many emails or LinkedIn requests did you send out, and then how many phone calls that turned into before? Like
I had a spreadsheet of about 250 or 300 people that I had researched and wanted to go and talk to. And I emailed every single one of them.
Let's back up though. How did you even form that list? Was it LinkedIn, like filtered searches? Like what?
It started with the Middlebury Alumni Network, and I went through the list of every firm that there was a Middlebury alumni at that I was interested in. Yep. I skipped all the big ones because I knew going in, no big firm is going to hire, a sophomore candidate, right? So going to all the small firms, any person I can find, and then asking my dad for any introductions that he has, going back to my high school friends.
This is venture funds. This is private equity
everything.
Funds. This is
private equity, wealth managers, like
anything finance related, because this is a sophomore internship.
Exactly. Anything I can do to get my foot in the door. Yeah. I'm very lucky that the fund did great after. It looks even better now, but at the time, it was a 5-man shop, an unpaid internship. It wasn't a big sexy thing, but it got my foot in the door and got me experience, and that was all I was after. Cool.
Okay, so you had that experience over the summer. You're kind of coming back now. You have something good on the resume, right?
Yep.
This is now your junior year.
So yeah, it's a good note to make here too. So it's a junior year with an asterisk. So back to that part where I said I was part of a class of 100 people. I took 6 months off before coming to Middlebury as a part of a structured program they have. Oh. And I had the credits from high school where I could have graduated early. So I got to pick my junior year. And so I basically said, in this summer, I'm going to graduate, even though I took time off, I'm going to graduate early and be quote unquote on time or whatever to, be in that class of people. And I recruited for investment banking and went through the full process, 2 internships. But
you had enough credits from high school with like AP classes and all this stuff where
yep.
you didn't need to take as many credits at Middlebury to graduate?
I could have graduated a full semester and a bit early.
3.5 years or so.
Yeah, exactly.
3 3.5 with a light semester or something like that.
Yeah, so Middlebury has a 414, and I think I had 414 being 4 classes, 1 class, 4 classes, how they structure it. I think I had 5 or 6 credits. So I could have sort of just skipped the whole last semester in a bit.
So what was your thought process? Were you leaving it as like an insurance policy in case you didn't get
exactly. That was it. It was I'm going to try to go about it and do this. And,
so at that point, what you decided, because I had a good internship, I'm going to go for it now. I'm going to recruit now for investment banking. Is that the?
Yeah, no, I had the grades. I had, 2 good internships, right? I mean, Clinton was not a toxic asset yet.
Yeah.
And so I had, 2 great things to speak to. I looked like a junior on paper. The only thing missing was 1 semester of grades. And, I had the APs right behind me to say, look, you want me to graduate on this date? I can graduate on that date. So, got to go be a part of that recruiting class.
Okay, cool. So, and then what would have happened if, like, let's say it didn't work out and you didn't get an internship? Would you have been able to push back then and go?
Well, it's sort of that's sort of what happened.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So you're going into we'll call it your junior year,
right?
To recruit with that class, and then so you're doing resume drops. They're coming in.
Yep.
How many resume drops? 30, 20, 50, what?
Well north of 50, I think a little bit under 100 in terms of
many people coming on campus to Middlebury.
Well, combination of on campus and listing schools.
Oh, and listings online.
Right. I would say on campus there were probably 24 ish that came on campus, of which I probably got half. Right, maybe say a dozen things that I talked to people.
For first round.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about on campus first. So first round, you kind of do 12, you drop 24 resumes, your resume 20 times rather.
Yeah.
About 12 first round interviews. What does it look like? Are these mostly banks, investment banks?
These are, I'm purely looking at investment banks.
So all investment banks, middle markets, bulge brackets.
Yep, combination thereof. Not all the bulge brackets. It's funny. Middlebury is very sort of funny about who goes there, right? So, Goldman is very heavy. Morgan Stanley for sure. Deutsche Bank, Bank of America, Barclays. There's not a lot of presence from Credit Suisse or from JP, or at least there wasn't when I was doing it. But I know we sent people there as well. Yep. But it was a very sort of different feel about how that was all going to work. And then, there are sort of random guys who come on as well. A lot of sort of boutique banks of Middlebury alums end up there and come. What's interesting about Middlebury is I think it's only recently come into its prime as like a, more of a core school for these guys. And a lot of it is alumni driven. So if we end up with a lot of alumni at a bank, they come on campus. And the story that I've heard, I haven't validated, but the legend, rumor, whatever, was that there was someone senior at Lehman Brothers from Middlebury. So Lehman Brothers, I think, again, this is someone should validate this, but was sort of the Middlebury bank. And post 2008, everyone sort of scattered, and we got to go and have a lot more reach across Wall Street as people sort of went elsewhere. It was very alumni driven about who goes where. But had a bunch of different on-campus interviews, bombed a fair number of them. Right. It's definitely a practice makes perfect sort of thing. And
did you not have our IB interview course yet, Alex? No, just kidding.
No, I actually did. And it's funny. So there were 2 things that got me through the process, really. Right. And one of them was absolutely your course. Because you said, early on, liberal arts school, Middlebury, while I was there till the very end, didn't even have an accounting course. And when I wanted to go take one separately, which I ended up doing, I did a summer Harvard accounting course when I was at the venture internship. They were upset about it. They didn't want to count it for credit. They didn't even want me taking the course. Like, they were very focused on, this is a liberal arts school. You shouldn't be focused on that. So all of my technicals came from your guide for the most part, and which was an absolute lifesaver. Still very grateful for that.
Even at a liberal arts college, I think nowadays, or even when you were interviewing, they had started grilling the liberal arts kids. They expected you to know it at that point. Whereas, when I was going through it, it was more of like, okay, do you know it or not? And if you said no, you could kind of scoot through. And it was more fit. behavioral. But yeah, tell me about that. So they were pretty heavy on the technicals for you guys, even with no accounting background.
It differed by firm. We definitely didn't get the worst of it, right? I have friends who went to other schools where I've heard of some crazy technical questions that I never got, right? But we definitely got into accounting, and you had to walk through an income statement and walk through what happens in a transaction across, the three statements, the basics, right?
Yeah.
I think I have friends who had questions that were far outside the scope of your guide. They went to more technical programs. I don't think I ever had a question outside the scope of your guide, right? So it was very much, if you knew the Wall Street Oasis guide backwards and forwards, which I basically had memorized, and I read it way too many times. It was my textbook of how to learn the stuff. You were going to be fine with the technicals.
Yeah.
My other huge thing that I'm forever grateful for, I had a whole crazy housing mix-up on campus where I ended up in an apartment of people that I didn't know at all. So it was just totally, I forgot exactly how it happened, but it was driven by one of my friends surprisingly transferred. I had gotten messed up out of my housing and he gave me his housing, and I fell into this thing. And two of the girls in my apartment were really hardcore investment bankers. And so one of them went to UBS and is now at B Capital. Mm-hmm. And the other one is a hot shot at Apollo. And between the two of them, the practice interviews that they took the time to give me, they were a year ahead of me, and they'd already sort of seen it. They had their offers lined up. They really carried me through the process and taught me. And I would not have made it if they hadn't sat with me for hours and practiced. So I was very, very lucky that I fell into that suite and met them.
Yeah, the mock interviews are a big thing that a lot of people underestimate. They think they can go and wing it, especially if they feel confident about like their speaking ability. Then they get in there and it's like, oh, that could have been a little bit smoother, and that's just enough to get the ding. And not
so I was really not smooth. And actually, there's a separate side story here as well where, and apologies if it's a tangent, but I still think it's funny.
Side stories and funny.
So I was really dead set on Goldman Sachs, like I mentioned. And in this interview,
by the way, is not a good strategy for those listening.
Oh yeah, no, it's absolutely not. And I hedged my bets, but I really wanted that, and I got rejected after that first round, that first time around. Mm-hmm. And it was the same night that one of the people in my apartment had broken up with their person they were dating. And the two of us had this ridiculous night. We finished off a bottle of vodka, and at like 2 a.m, she calls up her friend at Barclays and gets me an interview for like the next day.
Oh no. The next day.
And look, I could blame the hangover. I'm not going to blame the hangover. I was not a good interviewer at that point. And the feedback was basically like, you're a terrible interviewer. And luckily the MD at Barclays liked me enough to, sort of say, look, you're going to interview again, give you a second chance, go and talk to this analyst a few times and have him coach you and teach you how to do it. And so got even more help along the way, pure luck off of this like random night out of I get introduced to this guy, who further sort of coached me on, think about your points and have, A, B, and C, make sure every answer has a logical flow. Because and I'm doing it right now, I can sort of be all over the place if I don't.
You like the tangents. It's all good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like it. I think it's more interesting. Anyways, so you do finally kind of, so this is again, your junior summer, or you're applying for it early in junior year. So what happens? Yeah. So I end up with I ended with 3 different offers. I'm trying to think of how I want to tell the story best. And so one of the offers I got, the one that I ended up taking, I had interviewed at Wells Fargo, and Wells Fargo had a quota for Middlebury, for Middlebury for their whole listing school category. We weren't the core school for them, and so basically I think they took no one from Middlebury that year. But one of the guys there had liked me, and I was in a computer science class with a guy a couple of years older than me who had gone there, and the two of them sort of referred me to East Still Secured, which they owned at the time. And they knew that I came from a real estate background, and I talked about it, through my dad. I got introduced to East Still Secured at Wells Fargo, and then put together, oh, wait, you're from London. You can work in London. You have work authorization. Our London office needs somebody.
And I got stuck into the process in London through this sort of random connection at Wells Fargo, having, failed out of the normal interview process. So I had that and a couple other offers, and I won't shame the bank, but one of the other offers, the MD who called me with the offer literally said, and can I use language here and quote, or should I?
Yeah, I'll just
literally called me and said, "You were fucking terrible. Luckily for you, you were the least fucking terrible." And so I wasn't super excited about that offer in the way that it came.
You can't share the bank.
I won't shame the bank on that one.
Okay.
But they had a reputation for being like that at the time, and I would say that it's true based on my brief experience.
Okay.
So had a big bank offer that came with sort of a jerky form, a sort of not as prestigious offer, and then East Still Secured at the time was the #1 ranked real estate investment bank in the world by a good margin. And even better, they were a very small team having that ranking. The guys were super friendly. I wanted to be in London. It was sort of like the dream offer. Like it sort of worked out perfectly. If it wasn't going to be Goldman, I'm glad it was them. Now this is summer 2016. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot going on. And it's firstly an incredible internship experience. I'm a very strong modeler. It's entirely because of, and I'll thank him by name here because I'm incredibly grateful. There's an analyst I worked with, Tom Anderson, who spent way more time than I deserved with me on a really ridiculous deal that it's a whole other story. I don't want to run out of time. Basically, he still got staffed on a mega deal, and I got roped in as an intern, and there were some crazy intern stories that came through this mega deal, some of which are on Wall Street Oasis. And really just got the full banking experience, right? 100-hour weeks and multiple all-nighters in a week. We had a dedicated fridge full of Red Bull for the analysts and the interns. I mean, it was full force, right? It was heavy drinking, work hard, play hard. It was everything that banking was advertised to be, other than it was terrible money. I think it worked out to like $5 an hour. They were, the UK market is below the US market, and East Still's below the UK market, and it was like,
yeah,
what did I earn here? But I learned a tremendous amount, and I was really excited to go and hopefully go back. And then June 2016, Brexit. So my first ever paycheck comes the morning that the pound drops like 30% after the election results, and the whole summer after that become the last half of the summer. It's all sort of panic mode of what's going to go on. And the summer sort of comes out, and offers don't get made to any of the class, and it's sort of like, okay, stay tuned. We don't know what's going on. Are we hiring? Are we firing? Brexit. So Brexit happens. No offers get made. We have to sort of figure it out. They sort of tell us to stay on hold. They had sort of told me expect to hear back something around January or February, early winter. Well, Middlebury had to know if I was going to graduate early or not by like September. And so I had to give them an answer way before I was going to know. And I was not willing to go gamble, right? And so I told East Still, forget about it, and went back and re-recruited again. So I had a second junior year summer recruiting process.
But now you're all polished.
Now I'm polished, and now I've got a big transaction. I couldn't talk about it in the recruiting process because it hadn't closed yet, but I got to put a well north of 10 billion transaction on my resume. And I came from a fancy bank, and all was going to be good. And I love real estate banking. That's what I wanted to do. And I went down the whole process and went through it all over again. Again, came out with 3 offers. And it was actually funny. They all came within like 10 minutes of each other. And I remember literally getting one, putting them on hold, getting the second, putting them on hold, getting the third. So I had 3 phone calls. It was like simultaneous.
That's so weird. Well, probably because they all knew they were all jumping. It was earlier I'll call it your senior year. Was it earlier junior senior year that you got that, where it was like what was it, September, October?
Yeah, late October, I think it was, something like that.
So had they all kind of become on campus at the same time, and like we're just trying to, the super days were close?
So
how did that work? How were they all so close?
So basically all the interviews were really close together as well. So actually it was this crazy, again, brief side tangent story. I had So I had interviewed at William Blair and Macquarie back to back. where it was Chicago, New York. And I remember I had to take the Macquarie IQ test in my hotel room, staying up to like 1 a.m. with William Blair, and then doing the William Blair thing, coming back to New York and doing a Jefferies interview. And then, so that I actually
is this in the middle of a school week, a normal school week?
This is in the middle of a normal school week, and I'm coming back and all-nighter in schoolwork when I get back, and had amazing classmates who helped. Again, this whole story is I had the support of so many people helping me out.
Yeah.
But actually, so just on the timing, as we're thinking about this, so this actually happened in mid-October that I'm having these interviews.
Yeah.
And I then get a call from the Clinton campaign, and this is October of 2016. And so I end up taking 2 weeks off of school to go and work for them again in central Pennsylvania. And I come out of that immediately after election night. The morning after election night, I drove out of Pennsylvania and I drove to New York for my Goldman interview.
Oh my gosh, crazy.
And I think I got the offer from all three the following day. So Jefferies and Macquarie had waited a little bit, and Goldman moved quickly, and it just coincidentally happened like right, literally on the same phone calls. It was really something else. And then I had 3 offers.
Do you think it's because they knew the other ones were going? Do you think
Maybe.
Goldman moved fast because they knew the other ones were extending offers, like they have intel or something?
Maybe. I just thought I crushed my Goldman interview, to be honest, and it was that which is actually the next transition of the story of.
Yeah.
For all of these guys, I wanted to be on the real estate investment banking team, and Macquarie sort of gave it to me. Macquarie really wanted me. I had a fraternity brother who was helping me the whole way through. We were talking about doing an infrastructure fund offer. It was really going to be pretty great. Jefferies, sort of said, well, our real estate team is not so strong, but our healthcare team is, and they were really sort of courting me. And Goldman didn't really court, right? Goldman, I showed up and I just sort of hit it off with this VP while I was interviewing. He really liked me, I liked him. And Goldman doesn't do group specific offers, they do a placement process. And so, you take your offer and then you figure out what your group is going to be. Right. And so I ended up with these offers, and it was okay. It was, really strong Macquarie group, really strong Jefferies group, or roll the dice on Goldman. And Goldman had been the goal the whole time. Mm-hmm. And to your point about bad strategy focusing on Goldman, this was in hindsight probably a bad decision. Well,
no, I'm what I meant by only focusing. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I hear you, but no.
Now that you have the offer, take it.
Well, that's what I thought. I have the offer in hand. It's a generalist offer. I don't know where I'm going to be, but I hit it off with this VP and the sort of derivative structuring group, and I networked heavily with real estate and leveraged finance, and I really thought I was going to end up in one of those two groups, and I put both of those groups on my selection list. But when I finally got, first I took the Goldman offer. I made the decision to turn down Macquarie and Jefferies and wait out Goldman. And when I finally got placed at Goldman, I didn't get placed in leveraged finance or in real estate. I got placed with the derivatives group, which I had this great relationship with the VP. All is well, and I think all is well, and it's going to be great. Not what I was looking for, but it's Goldman and cool group, cool guy. And I don't want to shit on Goldman here. My summer there was just not what I wanted at all, and it was just not going to work. And I sort of halfway through the summer, because I'd already seen investment banking. Right? I knew what it was like to work hard. I knew what a 100-hour week was. It wasn't about that, but it was just sort of the group dynamic and where I was and how the group functioned and what we were doing, and just the whole thing. I sort of said, I can't do this for 2 years. I need to go try to lateral and do something else.
And by the way, for the record, when I say bad strategy, just to go for Goldman or be so focused on one bank, it's more around the specific odds. It's not like you were just applying to Goldman in the bullish brackets. Notice everybody, listen, he said he had interviews with Harris Williams and with other middle market banks. That's what I said. It's like, you get this bullish bracket or bust mentality on Wall Street Oasis, and it's really toxic and it's really actually not healthy. And there's some amazing elite boutique banks, middle market banks that are pay just as well, if some even better.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at the time, William Blair was, I think, the highest paying bank on Wall Street. I actually really wanted that one, and I don't know exactly why I didn't get it, but I have a feeling why I didn't get it. And it was literally a high school bullshit thing from way back when. Is my suspicion, as I bumped into someone who we never got along, and I think that's what did it. So
interesting. Okay, but you're at Goldman. You're halfway through the summer. You're like, this is not the group I want to be in. It's not.
Yep. And
okay.
asked to transfer, right? And apparently, I was not the only one. And it was sort of one of those things of, well, they can't all leave and all transfer, so no. And so I think all of my class, or at least the people I was interning with, I think we were all sort of looking at elsewhere. It wasn't that good of an experience, to be perfectly honest. And nothing against Goldman or even that group. It was just the vibes weren't there, we'll say.
Was it just because there wasn't enough deal volume? Was it all pitching?
No, it was a lot of deal volume. It was again, I really don't want to speak too negatively of anyone.
That's fine.
And so
it was just a certain leadership there wasn't exactly teaching you, or it wasn't going
to be the right fit where I could spend 2 years and feel like I was, alive and accomplishing things, and the group. Yeah, it wasn't the right thing.
Okay.
And
so that's a pretty ballsy move in the middle of your internship to ask for a transfer.
Well, I tried to do it softly. Right. Yeah. And it was brought up of like, oh, you should figure it out. And Goldman actually really encourages that, which I think is actually a great thing.
Yeah.
Is they really try to have people network across the firm and figure out where they fit. And I actually know a number of people I interned with who moved groups, right? It's a very doable thing.
Yeah.
And I went to a school alumni there who I had a relationship with and trusted, and talked to him about it. And, I was really trying to figure it out the smart way. It was probably a little bit ballsy. The ballsier part really was making the decision of, I don't want to go back here, and taking the time to go look out elsewhere instead of focusing on the internship, because there was not time to do both. And I kind of made that decision of, I need to figure out something else. This is not going to be it.
So how did you approach the end of that internship, the second half?
So I wanted to leave off as positively as possible. I wasn't trying to be a bottom bucket person, right? But I also made sure that I, was hedging my bets. And if it meant leaving a little bit earlier at night or saving some time at the end to, go and network or go and apply to things and go and interview. And, I was trying to go, and it was probably apparent, to be honest, but I was trying to do my best to go and mask it of, I'm not going to stick it out here for 2 years.
Yeah.
And it was confusing.
No return offer came.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you're going into your senior year with the unenviable position of having no return offer.
That's exactly right. And it was really, really stressful. I thought I was hot shit, right? I thought,
well, you're coming out of East Still,
Goldman.
Yeah.
Yeah. East Still, Goldman. I already, East Still had its own weird thing to it, explainable, but weird. Goldman, not coming out with an offer, is not the right look. And, having 2 junior year internships. And at that point, the Clinton thing is toxic, because now Trump is in office. So that has to come off the resume. But it's still
wait
around.
A second. Why? So Goldman, like, did you know you weren't going to get an offer because like things were going poorly in the first half? Or like, did you feel like did they tell you halfway through?
I had a conversation with my MD of basically sort of said, we've noticed that things have been slipping, are you trying to get an offer here and make this happen or not? And I didn't give him a straight answer, but I gave him an answer that sort of said, or not. And, I had the intervention conversation partway through.
Why would you do that?
It was really
because
miserable.
The reason, I realize it's miserable, but like you'd worked so hard to get up to that point.
It was a really emotional process to go through, because you're exactly right.
Why not just for another 6 weeks suffer and get the return offer with the smile on your face and then lateral?
I probably should have, but in my view, all the recruiting was happening right then and there, and it was get it now before it's all gone. Because if you wait till the end, there's going to be nothing left.
Got it. So, I got it. So your whole thing was like, if I don't lateral in this late summer, if I just grin and take it and smile and take it, I get an offer. I'm gonna miss all of the few lateral seats that are actually
exactly.
So you had to you were kind of hedging, trying to get the offer, still sort of, but
like not super, and like it was a very
because the value of the offer is not the actual offer. The value of the offer is just the signal it sends to other potential employers, right?
That's exactly it. But to your point, I had to go hedge, right? It was
yeah.
If I miss the boat because everyone's already filled their lateral seats, then I'm going to end up with this offer and then probably not taking it. And then where am I?
So for the listeners that aren't aware of that, like talk about that process and like, were you able to get into any lateral interviews? Because for people that don't know, lateral interviews is like for seats that aren't filled from other internship classes. Lateral just means from bank to bank. So it's like people who want to switch for whatever reason. So, Alex here was at Goldman. Theoretically, you probably got some looks. I'm thinking.
Yeah, no, I had a number of them, and again, it's really, really hard to make it work. But I made, I probably got into 3 to 6 processes, something like that, 3, 4, 5. I don't remember exactly how many. None of them got all that far, because that's the thing is you're coming off and you're exhausted. You're being, I particularly had a very, very grindy summer at Goldman. And I was just worn down. I wasn't coming off well. We're seeing here, it's a hard thing to sort of explain to people like, I wanted this and now I don't want it. And I'm talking to you, but also I'm not sure I'm committed to,
Yeah, they're like, why aren't you going to just get your offer at Goldman?
Right. So I did it poorly is the honest answer. I really sort of flubbed that process.
Sounds like it was a meat grinder, and you having done the previous meat grinder the summer before, you were kind of at that point ready to be working. It was kind of like this weird in between. You got caught in between of like not quite going full bore. So
I would differentiate it actually. I think a lot of people say like, oh, banking's a meat grinder, and it stays as like banking is, people accept banking as a meat grinder. There are a lot of different kinds of meat grinder, right? There are a lot of different ways to work 100 hours. There are a lot of different ways to hate your life. And I think Goldman was probably actually fewer hours than East Hill. The problem was it was more intensive hours, and it was much more stressful hours. My friend, you hear about people who work this 100-hour weeks and say, oh yeah, we're waiting to do a turn of deck, and you go to the gym and you toss a ball around, you're throwing stuff at the desk and you're hanging out. East Hill, we do 100-hour weeks, but we'd order Benihana for dinner and you get 45 minutes to hang out at the bar with, it was just different. And Goldman, it was just nonstop at my desk. And there was absolutely no room coming up for air. And that just made it much harder.
Got it. Yeah. So do you feel like that's a really good lesson, I mean, for people listening in terms of like knowing the specific risks of when you don't know what group you're going to, you don't know who you're really working for, and what the top levels is going to be like and what group you're going to be slotted into. It's kind of like that can totally change your summer and change whether you can actually make it through with an offer.
Yeah.
And the return offer rates, they're not even in the 80s or 90s%.
No, they're about 60.
Yeah. 60.
Yeah. So and that was a part of my math too, I had heard, and the previous summer, Macquarie had only made 10% return offers.
Horrible.
Right. And
you're like, I'm running away from there.
I'm like, yeah, like Macquarie, like, I don't know if I'm actually, that's going to turn out, Jeffries, was its own thing. And, again, I don't want to be too negative, but
that's sweaty too. That's sweaty too.
It's sweaty too. And the guys I actually would have worked for there, I think actually got in some very public trouble. So that was probably a bullet dodged.
Yeah.
So really in hindsight, like it was, Macquarie ended up making all the offers that year, went from 10% to 90+%. So of course I missed it, but with the knowledge that I had, I don't know if I made the right decision. Still, it's something that I still sometimes think about.
I think
where did I go?
For people who are looking for return offer data, there's in the company database that we do have percentages by bank. Awesome. So people are trying to look for that data, but like you said, it's not always past performance of offer rates.
It can vary significantly.
Let's put it this way. If you have 2 middle market banks that are equal weighting or similar weighting, or like, let's say one's slightly, but they have like a 90% offer rate and the other one has a 50% offer rate, I would almost always tell you to go with the 90. Historically, like just go with that because it's safer. But anyway, so you're it sounds like a brutal summer.
It was real hard. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you're kind of coming in, you don't get the offer. Was it kind of like you already knew you didn't have it kind of going to that last?
Yeah. It was, it's never fun to hear it, but it wasn't unexpected either.
Yeah.
So it was a hard time, right? I had a really hard fall that fall at school. It was also, again, having graduated on time, it's now my super senior year. So almost all my friends are gone. So I'm sort of like, I've got like one friend left on campus.
Yeah.
And I'm in this like super sort of dark place of I'm basically by myself and don't have my job lined up. I haven't figured this out. I've missed the bulk of the lateral recruiting process.
Yeah.
And it was.
You're back to the drawing board. The kid who knew everything was lined up his freshman year, which I would always say, usually if you know that early, you're going to be fine, right? It's very rare to be kind of thrown a curve. It sounds like you almost peaked early, like in your college career, and then like somehow stumbled at the wrong time. Like you're like towards the finish line, and you're like, wow.
It really just sort of fell apart there at the end.
Now tell me, as a 22-year-old, maybe even 23 at this point, you're like you said, you're super confident, which is very normal for a guy, who's done all those things. You're coming to senior year saying, I should be at XYZ bank. Right? But the reality is those seats are filled.
Yep, that's right.
So tell me how you kind of went about, when did you kind of have the realization that, hey, this may not be.
Oh, I knew before I got back to campus that basically all the lateral seats were filled, right? Because I'd been talking to them. Right. Yeah. And I knew I'd missed this boat, missed that boat. I had all the deadlines. I talked to all the people. They said, we're going to know, by X, Y, and Z. I had an Excel sheet of everyone's timelines. And, basically by September 1, it was toast. Right.
Yeah.
And so I got back to school and I had a real thing, right? Because I got thinking about, why did I want to be in investment banking in the first place? Right. And the answer when I was a little kid was, I don't know what I want to do. I know I'm good with numbers. I know I want to make a lot of money. And, I've sort of seen it and I'm going to do it and I'll figure it out later. Right. And the sophomore summer thing was really influential because I really saw what I saw it was almost like Shangri-La, right? Of like, you see these really smart guys doing really cool deals. They don't make, you're not making, mega fun private equity money, but you're making really good money and you're having fun the whole time.
Yeah.
And I'd had that in my mind of, okay, I want to do banking to get into venture capital, right? And that the seed was planted that sophomore year. And so as I'm going into senior year and I'm realizing all the lateral seats are gone, venture capital is what I came in this for. How do I make that happen? And I start doing a ton of networking with VC firms, really, really difficult to do. Got very little response rate.
Yeah, they're like, what do you mean you have banking all plastered all over your resume? Okay, yeah, sure. This venture, one internship here.
Right. With at that time it was a growing shop, but it wasn't even, again, now it would mean a lot more, but then it meant, not as much.
Yeah.
Luckily, the private equity firm still had stuff going on. There were a number of private equity firms looking for full-time analysts. So I got into a bunch of private equity processes thinking, okay, I can go make this work. And at the same time, I'm like saying, okay, how do I get into venture? Well, venture-backed startups are one of the best ways to go do that, right? And I knew that I liked being an operator. I knew that I had the financial knowledge, and I sort of said, okay, maybe a FinTech startup is another alternative option.
Yeah.
And went through the process for the FinTechs, and went through the process for the private equity firms, and came out in the end, again, really, really one of those like simultaneous moments of like two offers at the same time of like truly pick your path of, a real but not super well-known fund, but it was out in Connecticut, right? It would have been either living in the suburbs or a reverse commute. And it was in a group in the fund that I didn't really want to be in. And it was,
tell me about that. What do you mean, like a private equity fund?
Yeah, the private equity fund doing secondary transactions before those were sexy.
Okay.
And I was in their secondary transactions group. And to be honest with you, again, not shitting on the fund, I didn't like the guys. And that's what it really came down to was I'm in all these interviews and like all these guys kind of feel like bricks. And I'm doing the interviews with startups and they're all like coolest people. And the guy I was actually going to go work for, so I was talking to the startup where this is Oak North on my resume. So fastest ever FinTech unicorn, fastest ever unicorn in Europe. So fastest ever startup to get $1 billion valuation. Took them like 9 months to get $1 billion valuation.
Wow.
Right. They had, a few $100 million in capital raised, like really sort of they're in that growth phase, but they want to go and open up a US office. And they've brought in this guy, he's ex-Deutsche Bank, ex-Palantir, like, ex-Israeli special forces, just this like really all over the place, but really cool, awesome guy who I love. Right. And I'm like, okay, you talk to your mentors and your parents and pick the person you want to work for. And I'd even sort of learned that previously.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, okay, you know what? I can earn a little bit more money at this private equity firm, but then I'm living in the suburbs, I'm reverse commuting. Or I can go be the first analyst, second person in the super well-funded, super fast-growing startup with like a really cool guy to go work for.
Yeah.
And be on the ground in New York. And so that was the decision.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much time you have because there's
go ahead. I want to hear it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Oak North, and then I want to get to what you're doing now.
Yeah. So Oak North was all over the place. So we built out a team in New York.
I can't imagine. Yeah, you're the number one employee from that office. Okay, so yeah.
Yep, I'm the number 2 employee, number 1 junior employee. They hired a guy to run the office, and I was the first person in.
Yeah.
A lot of
first, tell me what they do. What is Oak North?
Yeah, so Oak North is a FinTech. They've got an artificial intelligence underwriting platform. They license out to big banks.
Oh,
and so they basically wanted someone with a sort of credity financing group, leverage finance type background, which I had.
Yeah.
And they were actively recruiting investment banking interns and people I was literally their profile, right? And they told me straight up, like, we want people who have, been in the investment banks and decided they wanted to go work for a startup, and they like have some basic technical skills, they know what they're doing, but they want to go work for a startup.
Yeah.
And their recruiter reached out to me actually and got in the process there. And it was all just sort of seemed perfect. It was this very sort of honeymoony period coming in.
Talk to me about pay. Was base really super low because of it being a startup?
Base was super low, not 50, because it was
like 50 low.
Not like 50 low.
Okay.
No, but I put it this way: I had 3 roommates living in a pretty shitty apartment. Yeah. I say shitty, very cheap with certain things that were not great, but enough upside where I wanted to live there. Yeah. And it was really, really tight. It was hard. You can make it work in New York, but you're not rolling in it.
Yeah.
And the way that we had negotiated it was they got me down on my base for a guaranteed bonus that would sort of top me up to be about market.
What does that mean? Market to what?
So if I'd gone to go work at a sort of a middle market investment bank, my all-in comp would end up the same if I lasted a year, was the idea.
I.e. about 120 to
exactly about 120. Okay. Right. So if I lasted it out, I had the guaranteed bonus where I was.
Okay. So did that happen?
It did, kind of, almost not, and that's why I think this is one of the more interesting parts of the whole. It's not that it's been a boring adventure, but this is one of the more interesting parts of the adventure.
I mean, yeah.
So, go to Oak North. Come to go work for this guy. We hire another person who's going to be another senior person in the office, right? So now there are sort of 2 MD level people, and me. He gets fired. Oak North was a very political, very Game of Thrones. Everyone's got sharp elbows. It was investment banking on steroids in terms of the environment that's sticking around there. Yeah. And he had just gotten beat. Right. And they were jerking him around and they given him a very hard time. And it was really one of those I quit, you're fired moments for him.
Yeah. This is the guy that you were coming into work for?
This is the guy that I came in to work for.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I lost him, which was a huge blow. And I'm thinking, okay, do I even want to be here anymore? I've only been here for, a handful of months. I'm fresh out of school. Like, I know it's a bad look to hop again, but I should probably start looking around. But in the meantime, I'm working with this other, senior person who I really like her as well. Frankly, her skill set's less of a fit for the job, and she has, it's a good thing and a bad thing because I'm getting to sort of carry a lot more of the weight. I'm actually speaking in pitches. I'm getting to talk to these really senior executives at 23 years old and being really the face of this thing, whereas I wasn't as much before because she sort of needed a little bit of help to go carry stuff. And I'm sort of looking around, but it's a not bad life, right? I'm not getting paid as much, but my hours are way better. Right. It's not 9 to 5, but I'm not all-nighter in only a handful of times. And it's because of other people dropping balls. Yeah. It was not a terrible thing. And it was one of those things that I can stick this out for a couple of years and figure out business school or venture, or, this is a good look. Right. I was sort of content to stick it out there. And so it's me and her working together. We're looking at hiring people and we're trying to go grow. We can't get a hold on business. There are issues with our execution. There are issues with corporate strategy. There are issues with the product. It's, there are all sorts of issues that we're having, and it's just, we're not having success. And one of the parts that actually made it difficult as well was in Europe, the CEO of Oak North is a bit of a celebrity. And so he can get him any meeting because he's him. And anyone will meet with them because like they know who he is.
Right.
And it does not translate to the US. And that was not understood. It's like, well, why can't you get a meeting? We have Rishu. Rishu doesn't mean anything here. Like, we're just two guys, like, or a girl and a guy. It's like we're figuring it out. But it was a stressful look for the office. And what ended up happening, and one of the crazy stories. So we get a meeting with RBC in their Toronto office, and it's through one of the founders, and he's worked at McKinsey, and someone there was at McKinsey, and we have this whole sort of, it's all sort of set up, and this is like a big meeting. This is like every senior stakeholder, 30 some people from their side. Yeah. Like it's a full bank meeting. We spent like a month prepping for it, like all sort of going well. And the CEO at one point sort of loses confidence. You know what? You guys don't just take the first. I'm going to come in and come take it with you. And we're all going to do it together, and I'll see how you guys operate. And at this point, my boss sort of says, look, I know you're just talking in meetings, but CEO is there. You're not supposed to be doing that. Like, sit there, take notes, carry the pitch books, like I'll handle it. Meeting's a disaster, total disaster. CEO carries the whole thing. My boss didn't execute. I sat there quietly, having been told to sit there quietly. In the middle of the meeting, my flight gets canceled. And I'm texting the CEO's secretary, and the CEO flies private. Me and my boss are flying coach. And he says, oh, well, no problem. Like, I'll put you on the jet. And so we come out of this meeting. It's a terrible meeting. My boss does not get put on the jet. Her flight gets canceled on the way to the airport. But we're in the the Maybach, right? Yeah. And CEO's up front, the boss and I are in the back seat, and he's yelling at us. You guys were terrible. You guys were awful. Just totally, for like 45-minute ride of pain. My boss is texting me like, he doesn't mean you, he means me. Whatever. We get to the airport. I get on the plane. I spend 2 hours in the air on a very small private jet, face to face with the CEO, basically being grilled about how I'm garbage and being told I'm a post box. What do you do? I don't add any value. When I was 23, I started my own venture fund. What have you done? Really just a really, really miserable private jet ride.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I get the picture. So was that like the signal that you needed to get out?
Well, it was ish. And so I was actively looking already, and I came back and I was like, okay, I'm taking my boss texted me, and I had the same thought, like, we're both taking the next day off. Neither of us are working. Like we took a mental health day. Yeah. On a Thursday. Right. And Friday morning, I get a text from my boss at 7:45 in the morning. They just fired me. I argued for your job. I don't know what's going to happen. Let me know, like, what I can do to help. Very, very nice text. So she gets fired. I get a call 15 minutes later. If you want a job, move to London by Monday. And so I moved to London over the weekend.
Wow. Okay.
And so I moved to London.
You moved to London over the weekend, but I can see from your LinkedIn, you were only there for 5 months.
That's right.
So tell me what happened. How did you end up back? We got just to speed up the process. You ended up there for another 2+ years after that crazy jet ride.
No, I know. It's really an adventure. And I'm sorry we're taking so much time. I'll try to accelerate it. So there was a guy there who was hired the same day as me, same role as me, same everything as me. Really slick guy. Not that I'm not, somewhat polished, but this guy's really, really polished, right? And he's just sort of a navigator, manipulator person. And he saw me as a threat to him because we were in our own territories before, and now we're not.
This is in London?
This is in London. So I land in London on Monday. I get put with this guy, and he's in all the deals. I'm in none of the deals. I'm trying to be friendly, like, how can I help? And I basically get stuck by the printer, like, screw you, do nothing, right? And I'm trying to get involved in stuff. He's taking me off email chains. He's changing meeting rooms. He's like intentionally keeping me out of stuff to just like screw me. At one point, I'm supposed to have a meeting with my boss, my new boss, and he saw me outside the conference room and ran his meeting 2 hours over. So I couldn't meet with my boss. It was just really out of hand. And on the Thursday, he throws me this PowerPoint that needs to go out to a client in like 4 hours. And it's like 100 slides long and it's absolutely garbage. It needs to be completely redone.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, what's your responsibility? And of course I failed at it because it needed, at least a full day of work and I'm racing all morning and whatever. Gets turned in. I get brought upstairs to conference rooms. I get fired. And they literally say like, Alex, we're sorry, it's not working out. And I looked the co-founder in the face and I said, this is bullshit. I had positive reviews in the US. He moved me 4,000 miles 4 days ago, right? All I've tried to do is be involved. No one's let me be involved. I haven't even gotten to meet with my boss yet. Yeah. And this is over that PowerPoint that I had absolutely no chance of doing correctly. Like, what's going on here? Yeah. And the guy says, you know what, you're right. And takes me by the shoulder, walks me back downstairs, transfers me over to the lending side of the business instead of the tech side of the business. Yeah. Assigns me to a new MD. That MD gets in a car accident over the weekend.
What?
So I know. It goes on. It's a long story, but it continues to twist. I come back, he's not there. I have to make my own way in London. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that happens in London, but the plan is always we're going to reopen a US office and Alex is going to be the guy to help reopen the US office. So I lasted out in London. It's a whole big to-do. There's, good blood, bad blood mixed. 15 people or so get fired while I'm there, right? Because this Oak North fires people all the time, left and right. They just have huge turnover. Yeah. It's still very stressful. I'm trying to last it out. My girlfriend is furious at me for having done this whole thing in the first place. Yeah. And I moved back to the US. We start up another new office. I'm the first analyst all over again. Yeah. In the interest of time, I'll skip most of the crazy stories here, but we had a little bit more success, right? We raised money from SoftBank. We started up a proper debt fund. We're doing, lending in the US. We built a great team. I love my boss that we hire, and all these different people that we've brought in. It's a really great thing. Not a lot of success due to literal cultural differences. We go to credit committee and guys in the UK say, well, why don't you have this? Well, it doesn't exist in the US. Well, why don't you have that? We won't do that in the US. And so we have all these deals that we're sourcing. We have $1 billion+ pipeline and we're barely getting stuff through because every deal we're having to explain why it's different than how it would work in the UK and nothing closes. I got frustrating. I thankfully got a few deals on my resume so that they would talk about, but not nearly as many as I would have liked.
So you knew it was time to start looking once you started. Yeah.
I was actively looking. I'd been in the process for 6 months with a dream VC. And I'm so excited for this whole thing to sort of happen. In the middle of it, Oak North sends me to India. I spend a month in India building out their back office from scratch for the US. Yep. And there's all sorts of adventures from India as well. But I did a month in India, establishing all the US back office procedures and how all that was going to go work. Yeah. And come back, and I'm still in the recruiting process of the VC, and all this is going on. And then it's March 2020. COVID hits. Yeah. The VC drops the process. We're not going to hire anybody. Oak North goes full remote. I buy a sports car. I drive out to my family's house in Wyoming. I'm going to go work remote from Wyoming. I don't want to be in New York, and my building's full of doctors and diplomats. I don't want to be anywhere near. It's the worst building in New York to be in, possible for this situation. I'm out of here. Yeah. We have a meeting with Oak North. We get told there's $700 million in cash in the bank. We're not going to fire anybody. You're all safe. 2 weeks later, my whole team is fired. Whole office is gone. They have the gall, and I will forever be upset about it. On top of this, twofold. Of one, they published an article in the paper saying how proud they are they haven't laid anybody off after having laid off our whole team. And two, when I first joined Oak North's bonus cycle is based on when you join. It's not an annualized cycle. And there was an accounting issue my first day. So instead of being on the March cycle, I was on the April cycle. And so I had been told my bonus expectations for that year, and I had earned it. I had multiple all-nighters. We'd closed deals. I went to India for these guys.
Yeah.
And they came back and they said, well, COVID, we were zeroing your bonus. And also you're fired. And
sounds like a pretty brutal place to.
Honest. It's a great builder of a person to come through that place. It is a meat grinder of all of the wrong sorts. And it's helped me out in everything else since.
Let's talk about what you're doing now though.
Yeah.
How did you get in? And let's give Lex some time.
Yeah. Again, apologies for how long this has gone.
That's good.
So basically they get fired from Oak North. One of my friends says, hey, look, I've got this great company, Lex, they're hiring, like, let's get you in. Next day after I get fired, I'm on the phone with the CEO having an interview. I'm in the process. I take their modeling test. I'm talking to people. It's COVID. The economy is destroyed. I have a verbal offer from Lex a month later. And so I'm happy, right? At this point, it's like, okay, cool. Like, I get some time off in my career. I've got this fun little sports car that I bought.
Yeah.
They don't need me to start right away.
What car?
I had a BMW with the M package on it and convertible, and nice. It was the last year with power steering. Without power steering. So I had got the proper road feel, and I'm driving around the country in a very high powered BMW sports car.
You're still in Wyoming at this point?
I'm in Wyoming. I'm by myself. 3 months with no human contact, having stocked up on food. I have to go and be social. I've got a friend in Montana. I say I'm going to go drive up there. It starts what becomes a 30,000 mile road trip. So I drove the BMW 30,000 miles all over the country, hit most of the states. I've now been to 46 states. Amazing. After this road trip. End up totaling the car in a surprise snowstorm in January, and have the conversation where it's like, okay, it's time to go start at Lex. I've had my fun. I have this thing. Let's go get started. So started in Lex almost exactly a year ago. Actually, a year ago tomorrow is my anniversary at Lex. So I worked for a Series B stage startup in Oak North. Lex at this time is a seed stage startup. We've now just this past week raised our Series A, which is super exciting.
And tell me more about what is Lex and what do they do? Yeah,
so Lex is a real estate investment bank, registered broker dealer. We basically are trying to go and fill a hole in people's capital structures about how people deal with, who has the equity in their real estate transactions, right? So we do equity recaps, but with the idea of having those recaps be at a premium to the existing market, right? So because in the existing recap market, there's usually a discount. So we're saying now you can recap at full market price, right? With permanent capital, right? So you don't have an LP who needs to be cashed out in however many years, right? That's non-voting. So you're not getting married to someone and having to go interview and deal with partners, just sort of quiet, easy, full price capital that you can come in and take out some of your equity with and rework your capital structure.
And this is for real estate in particular.
For real estate in particular, we'll come back to that in a quick sec, but it's all enabled by, we built an ATS from scratch. So we partnered up with NASDAQ for their matching system, and our engineers spent multiple years building out basically a mini stock exchange, you can think of it as, where you can actually trade these things. Everything is QSIP that goes through DTCC. It looks, feels, and acts like a stock. You can hold it in your brokerage account. It's fully liquid, direct ownership of real estate that's tax advantaged, right? Just like you owned it directly instead of through a REIT. You get to go pick a single asset, and you're buying in institutional real estate like how a fund would buy, but for $250 of minimum investment, with a huge liquidity option through our marketplace. So I thought the idea is brilliant. We had a bunch of guys, including one of my. It was another funny story. I got the offer because I knew Drew, or it was in Drew's social circle. And after getting the offer, everyone realized, wait a minute, our chairman knows you. And I figured out the chairman is a friend of my dad's. And so I was, as I'm thinking about my dad's, like, oh yeah, go work for him. Yeah.
Hilarious.
And end up actually, my analyst now is, he got hired parallel process to me, started the same day as me, is my dad's old boss's son. So it's even more of, and again, perfectly parallel time, just a very sort of incestuous world. I go to Lex, my fourth day at Lex, again, key of the fourth day, I get transferred. And so we'd brought in this one from Blackstone. who was going to go be our sort of special ops at the firm and do stuff that wasn't real estate. And all of a sudden, I'm not doing real estate. I'm doing special ops. I'm doing jewelry and diamond and art investment banking. And so I spend 6 months doing that business line. We go back to real estate as the main business is what we're trying to go do. And I've been, having a great time, a lot of fun, and we're really getting stuff done here now at Lex. So we have our first, we did a beta test IPO right as I came in back in February of 2021. Mm-hmm. That was friends and family, make sure the system works. Yeah. We did our retail test IPO of let's see, how we can actually get retail demand going, and don't push it with the institutions, but just see what ordinary people who can buy this stuff, because we can sell to non-accredited investors. Anyone can go invest in it. Let's see how that market looks. And now we're sort of ramping up into our growth phase with our Series A of, okay, now we can do bigger deals. We have institutional partners. We can do more and more stuff, and we've got a pipeline of deals coming down to go and launch in 22. So really exciting. I think the takeaway of that, as we're running out of time, one of the things of the startup and the Oak North stories and the Lex story of being transferred and back, I think you work hard, but one of the biggest things at a startup that's both great and terrible is every day is going to be different, and you don't know what the next day is going to bring. And sometimes there are really, really rapid changes in direction that are hard to get used to. And the good news is, having been through a meat grinder like Oak North, everything kind of feels tame in comparison, and the people here are a lot easier to work with, and I'm a much happier person. So it's been a lot of fun.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, well, I appreciate you sharing your story. Any other final words of wisdom before we call it? Or any other plug? You want to plug it?
Yeah, I mean, I would absolutely want to plug Lex as my last going word in this. I apologize, very, very overtime interview.
It's okay.
Look, I mean, we just raised our Series A, led by Peak Six and Kozla following on. We've got an absolute ton of momentum coming into 2022. I came here, aside from the fact that I was encouraged through the connection, I think that this is really the coolest concept going right now in FinTech and real estate, right? There's a huge trend in the world of democratization, and I don't think real estate has been properly democratized. I think we have the tools to go do that. And, the fact that we've brought in the right team to go underwrite and have good deals coming through, I think makes it all the better.
It's awesome. Super exciting.
Yeah.
You can check it out at lex-markets.com.
Awesome. Patrick, thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex. Appreciate your time.
And thanks to you, my listeners at Wall Street Oasis. If you have any suggestions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to send them my way, Patrick at wallstreetoasis.com. And until next time.